Now I'm 4 lines above the Mishnah on Laman and base. We're just doing this little piece again. Well, the Rava was of the opinion that Misa Mapelis, which means that in every single scenario where, what did we have? When we had the three brothers, two of them were married to two sisters. Remember, we have Reuven over here and Shimon over here, married to Leah and to Rachel. And then we have a divorce, right? Reuven divorces Leah, and then the Nasoi Nachris over here, Levi dies. So we said that at this point in time, there's no attachment between Dinah, who is unrelated to anybody, and this former wife, who is divorced. So therefore, she can do Yibum with Shimon at the point in time, and she could do even with Shimon when Ruvain dies, right? Okay, that's the Mekansa Megarish. So we said Mizui. This is the case where we would allow Dinah to marry this fellow, but not in any other case. So we said that doesn't work according to Rava, because Rava holds that the only case basically where Dinah would be forbidden is when at the time in which Ruvain died, he was still married to Leah. But even if Ruvain actually married Leah completely after Levi died, and only after the marriage he divorced Leah, we would still allow Dinah to marry Shimon over here, to do even with Shimon over here. So we said, according to Rava, what does the Bizuhi case come to exclude, right? So that was Rava Haniku Savlak Ravashi, Zui Lemute Meis Below Girish. So if he held like Ravashi, who holds that there's Zika, so this is the case. We said that it comes to exclude the case where there's no Gerishin altogether. What do you mean there's no Gerishin altogether? Meaning that Levi died, and now Ruvain marries Dinah, right? And the two of them are still, Dinah and Leah are still his wives at the time that he dies. Well, if Leah is still his wife at the time that Ruvain dies, so obviously Dinah is not going to be allowed to do Yibum, because everybody knows that in that case she's clearly at Saras Erva, because Leah, who's the sister of Rachel, is still alive and well. So that can't possibly be the case. So therefore, no, the case is Kanas below Giresh is like this. When we say Mace below Giresh is there was no Kanas. That basically Levi had died, and Levi had died, and Dinah never actually ended up doing Yibum with Ruvain, and Ruvain was still married to Leah at this point in time, and now Ruvain dies. So because of the fact Rava held Yesha Zika, it's considered as if, since Dinah was designated for him, it's as if he already married her. So that's the case that he would come to exclude. Say in that case, not that he actually married Dinah, he hadn't married Dinah. In this particular case, because he held Yesha Zika, so that's why you would in this particular case, even if he actually if he never actually divorced her, we would say that Dinah cannot do Yibum, despite the fact that she never actually got married to Ruvain, because it's considered as if, by virtue of Zika, she married Ruvain. So it's considered as if she's the co-wife of Leah, and that's the case that Rava would come to exclude that you would not, that in that case, you would not do Yibum, okay? Where you do not have a Gerushin in that particular case. So it says, concluded the Gemara, Eli Isavala Rav Nachman. But if he held that Ein Zika, so then she would be able to do Yibum, so that wouldn't be the case. Therefore, we said it must be that he held like Ravashi in this particular case. But he wouldn't hold like Ravashi in terms of Ravashi holding that if the divorce took place after Levi died, and then he did Yibum with Leah, and then he divorced he did Yibum with Dinah, and then he divorced Leah. He wouldn't hold. Then in this particular case, it would be usher for Dinah to do Yibum, because as long as the divorce took place before the Misa of Ruvain, since he held Misa Mapelis, so then since he wasn't married to Leah at that point in time, Dina would have been able to do Yibum in that case. Okay, good. So I just, I hadn't really explained that the case that we're excluding, according to Rabbi, is one where Ruvain had never actually married Dina, but it was just a case of Zika. So I wanted to clarify that. That was according to Rashi. I mean, it could be that what I said was correct according to somebody, but I wanted to explain according to Rashi. Now, we were up to the Gemara at the very end of Laman and Base, going over to Laman Aleph. Laman Aleph, remember our Mishnah had all of these different cases where we said, when is it considered like the Tzara, the wife's sister? Let's take Levi and Dina out of the picture for a second. But when is it considered to be that if there was a marriage to an Ashes Achos Ishto, that it's definitely considered to be a marriage for purposes of prohibiting the unrelated wives, that she would be considered to be a Tsaras Erva. So the Mishnah spoke about if there was a Safek Kiddushin. There was a Safek Kiddushin that Ruvain had given, had thrown a ring between himself and Leah, and we're not exactly sure whether it landed closer to her, closer to him. So we don't know if she's really married. So we said in a Safek Kiddushin case, we have to be worried that maybe the marriage really was good, and therefore now Dina is prohibited, but maybe the marriage wasn't good and Dina is permitted, and therefore even required to do chalitza or yibum. So therefore we would do chalitza in that particular case. However, if we had a Safek Gerushin case, what's Safek Gerushin? He was already married to Leah, and he threw her a get. And we're not sure if the get landed closer to her so that she's really divorced, whether she's still married. So then in such a case, when we inferred, since the Mishnah didn't speak about that case, that we assume that the Gerushin was no good, and therefore that Dina is completely permitted to marry somebody else without having to do chalitza or yibum with respect to Ruvain's brother Shimon, and she can just go off and she can marry Levi over here. Yay, Levi, I'm proud. Okay. So the Gemara had asked, why don't we just do as a chumrah, just in case the divorce, divorce was good. Why don't we just have her do a chalitza just as a chumrah? So we said, this is 6 lines in the bottom. Hi, a chumrah the asli de kulahu. It's a chumrah that can come to a kula because zimnin the asalu mekadish la achosa. Because we may work with the assumption then, if she's going to do a chalitza, that it must be that the marriage, that the divorce that was contracted between, then in this particular case, the divorce that was contracted between Ruvain and Leah was in fact a good divorce, right? Now he's going to come and he's going to marry her sister, Kiddushay Vadai, and it will be definitely a Kiddushin. And we'll say, no, the Kiddushin wasn't Chal because of the fact that he's still married to this sister, right? Or maybe somebody else is going to come along and give her a kiddushin, and we'll say, oh, it must be that we already determined that the gerushin was definitely, not a good gerushin, and therefore the second marriage is not good. The asal of Amar, the Tzara, the Yevume, the Kama Kiddushin, Basalav Kiddushin. So this is the case where, not where he had been, not the case of Gerushin, this is the case of Kiddushin, that we're worried that the case of Kiddushin is going to be problematic. We'll say he was never married to Leah in the first place, right? And because of the fact that we're not allowing him to do, we're not allowing Leah at this point in time to do Yibum, so therefore I'm sorry, because of the fact that we're not allowed, we're saying about the Tzara, given the Aslamat, so the Tzara, the Yevume, we're saying that she can't get divorced, Ami the Kama the Kiddushin. So they'll say that the first Kiddushin really was a good Kiddushin. So therefore, if he goes afterwards and he marries the sister, so the marriage to the sister is not considered to be a good Kiddushin, or if she marries somebody else, it won't be considered to be a good Kiddushin. With the Basalav Kiddushin, given the Kamatzachas Chalitza, so we said no. Since we're requiring in this particular case, meaning the case of the Safek Kiddushin, which is mentioned in the Mishnah, Kimin Tachamitzachas Chalitza, made the Yadi the Chumma Bi'alma. So everybody will know that it's only a Chumma Bi'alma, because otherwise, because otherwise we wouldn't require a Chalitza altogether. We would just, because we would say that, oh no, if we're so sure that the Kiddushin was a good Kiddushin, then we would just allow Dina to go off and to marry somebody else and to marry Levi Pashuk. So therefore, it's clear that it's a suffix situation, We're not going to say that if he now goes and he marries a different woman, or he marries the sister of Leah, this woman over here, Rachel, we're not going to say that it's definitely a good, that it's a good Kiddush. Fine. So you go back to the last status, meaning that you assume that if it was if it's a question of whether it was a good Kiddushin or not, so if there hadn't been a good Kiddushin, so then the status of Dina is that she would have had to do Yibum or Chalitza, so we're going to require her to still do Chalitza. However, if it's a case of a Safek Gerushin, so Safek Gerushin, the assumption was that Dina was allowed to get married to Shuk, so it's a Safek that Leah got the divorce, so we're not going to require Chalitza or Yibum, we're just going to allow her to go out the Shuk. So we say, why? So in that case as well, where it's a Safek Gerushin case, why don't we also say to Dina, what harm is it going to cause if we say to Dina, go and do Chalitza, right? So Ihaki Gerushinami Litni Sacha Chalitza, who made the Yadi the Chumma Bi'amo, and we'll know that it's only a Chumma, just like we said before, because of the fact that we're not allowing her to do Yibum. So therefore, nothing bad is going to come out of it. So we say no. People will get confused if you tell Dina, "Oh, you have to do chalitza" in such a case with Shimon, despite the fact that we're pretty sure, based on Chazaka, that Leah is still married to Ruvain. So then Dina might actually do yibum with Shimon, and if she does yibum with Shimon, it'll turn out that she's really a tsaras erba, and that it was prohibited, and it's going to be an Isser Eishesach. It's going to be an Isser Tsaras Eishesach, which is an Isser Erba Isser Karis, right? So Hakanami, so we say, but in the case of the Safek Kiddushin as well, where we're saying that we're not really sure if Reuben got married to Leah, so but maybe he did, so therefore we're telling Dina, okay, just do Chalitza. But in this case as well, Hakanami, there's still a fear that when we tell Dina that she should do Chalitza, maybe she'll actually do Yibam as well. So we say, no, in this case, who cares? Because of the fact that Reuben wasn't previously married to Leah, it's only a Safek, so you're allowed to rely upon the Chazaka that, he's probably not married to Leah and only to Dina. And if he's only married to Dina, Dina's allowed to marry Shimon because the fact that she's not a Tsaras Eva. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. So Eisvei Abaye, we're going to eventually come to the conclusion that the mission is labdafka. That just like we were machmir in the case of the Safek Kiddushin, we're also going to be machmir in the case of the Safek Gerushin to require Dina to do a chalitza. So that's going to be the maskana, but it's going to take us a while to get there. Hopefully not too long. So Eisvei Abaye asked the question. Nafal Abaye is Allah be'abas achiv. Let's say that this fellow here, Ruvain, is married to the daughter of Shimon. He's married to the daughter of Shimon. Okay, this is a daughter of Shimon over here. I guess in this case we'll make Dina the daughter of Shimon, be the appropriate age and so forth, right? So he's married to his niece, and now the a house, falls upon both of them. Okay, the house falls upon both of them, and it collapses, and they both die. As you can see, they both dead. Okay, but we don't know. I don't know how closely you were watching. Which one died first? Were you able to tell? No, we don't know. We can't tell. We don't know which one of them died first, right? Okay, now if he died first, so then it turned out that his niece over here was still married to him at the time that he died, and if there is a co-wife, so then the co-wife would be a tsaras erva. But if she died first, so then there was no co-wife at the time of his death, and the tzara would be allowed and even required to do yibum or chalitza with Shimon, right? Ben yadua ezrahem meis rishon. So tzarasa. So the co-wife over here, who's more Ruvain's age, but that's the co-wife who's not related to Shimon. So the co-wife, since we're not really sure whether there was whether there was a severance of the relationship between Ruvain and Dina before Ruvain's death, because we don't know which one died first. So here we are requiring chalitza. So isn't this kind of like a Safek Gerushin situation? It was a chazaka that this woman was from Muteris L'Shukra. She was at Tsaras Eva. Now we're also not sure whether she lost that chazaka, and yet in this case, we're not saying she can go up and marry Levi. We're saying she has to do chalitza with Shimon. So why don't we say she, just like in the previous case of our Mishnah, where we were talking about the Safek Gerushin case, where the Mishnah didn't talk about the Safek Gerushin case, and we said that's because we're not even going to require chalitza in that case, because she's b'cheskas head to the shuk. So why don't we say the same thing over here? Misafek atabali osra, al tiasreni misafek. So you should say the same thing. We shouldn't require chalitza. So you say that, oh no, in this case we're going to be machmis. We say no. This is, as we said before, this will be an because if we're going to require the chalitza, maybe she'll actually do yibum, and it'll turn out that Dina was that the niece was the last one to die, and therefore this woman over here, Leah, was unrelated. It's Tsaras Eva, and if she does yibum with Shimon, it's going to be an Isser of Ashes Ach. So Gerushin, the Shchichi does Rabbanan. So we say, we're not gozer that we're worried she's going to do yibum in this particular case, because having a house full on people is not so common. But a gerushin and a Safek gerushin situation, is more shchiach. It's more shchiach to have divorces. We might have questions: is it a good divorce or is it not a good divorce? So it goes there. If you would require chalitza, then yibum might occur. So better to rely upon the chazaka. However, mapolis or delo shchichi lo gazu barabanan. However, when you have a house full on both of them, so then the Chachamim will not go there that if you do chalitza, if we require chalitza in a Safek situation, then it might lead to yibum. So we're not as worried about that. So inami gerushin the kaima ever or alternatively, you can explain that in the case of gerushin the kaima ever the kamuchach but savasa tzachas lachalitza amukamim beirabanan the gita ma'al. Then in the case of the Safek gerushin where you had Ruvain married to Leah, who's the sister of Rachel, and also to this unrelated woman. And the assumption is, therefore, that Dina is generally going to be permissible. And I have a Safek whether the gerushin that he gave Leah was a good gerushin or not. So everybody, so if I'm going to require chalitza of Dina, so what was the case? The case was where Ruvain threw a get to Leah, and we don't know whether it landed closer to him or closer to her within 4 amos, and therefore we are uncertain whether it was a good get or not. So if we're going to require chalitza of Dina, people will say the Chachamim investigated the situation and they came to the determination that the place they brought out the measuring stick or whatever, like they do in the football games, and they came to the determination that Leah, that the get was closer to Leah, so it really was a good get, and that really might lead to the mistake of doing yibum with respect to Dina. And then the yibum is going to be performed. And it won't even be like a reliance upon chazaka in this case. That's why we don't want yibum to occur, because the assumption is that she doesn't need yibum, and it would be an isserei ach. However, mapolis become above rabbanim in mapolis. But in mapolis case, where the house fell on both of these on the two people, the husband and the niece, and there's also a co-wife in the picture. Everybody knows that it's impossible to determine which one died first. So when the Chachamim require chalitza, nobody's going to say, "Oh, that's because the Chachamim came to the determination that the house fell on the niece first, and that's why we're requiring chalitza." We'll say, "No, it's obvious that the Chachamim would have no way of making that determination. So therefore, it's not going to lead to yibum." Nobody's going to say that, "Oh, well, they came to the conclusion that she definitely is eligible for yibum or chalitza." But now we're going to ask the question: is it really true that we don't require chalitza in the case where there was a Safek gerushin between Ruvain and Leah, the sister of Rachel over here, that we would just allow Dina to go off and marry Levi without anything? Is that really true? That's what we concluded from the Mishnah, but is it really true? Milo Tanan, is it not recorded in the Mishnah elsewhere that we do require chalitza in such a case? Tanan, there's a Mishnah that says, if she was standing in the Rishus Harabim, meaning the wife who is, let's say, the Leah, the potential heir in a Yibum situation, she's standing in the Rishus Harabim. Karavla Megareshes. So if he throws her a get, he throws her a get. So as we said, no, he's still alive. He throws her a get, and as we said, if it lands closer to her, so then she's Megareshes. Karavla ain't a Megareshes. Mechza mechza. If it's exactly in the middle, 50% in the middle, Megareshes ain't a Megareshes. So then we have to be worried. Maybe she's Megareshes, but maybe she's not Megareshes. So therefore, we have to treat her according to the stringencies of both. I mean, in the my help us. What does it mean? We treat her according to the stringencies of both. Well, Tikoinu asurale, that if he's a Kohen, he can't remain married to her because maybe it really was a good get, and the gush is asura to a Kohen, right? The erbahi, and if she's an erba like in our case, so then we would say, even if she walks away, now Ruvain dies, we would say that Dina requires a tzarasa by a chalitza. So we don't say Dina walks and just marries Levi. We say no, Dina requires chalitza. So that's the opposite of what we've been saying up until now. So we don't say that we're worried that, oh, well, the assumption is that really the get wasn't a good get. And therefore, if she would marry Shimon at this point, even with Shimon, it would be an Isser Eishasat. We say, no, let her do Chalitza, and we're not worried that she's going to come to do Yibum. So Hayim Allah, so we say, no, that case is different. Why is that case different? Because that's the case. Hayim Allah, Rabbi Yosef, Dami Travayo, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef said in that case, in that particular Mishnah, they said that Hacha, B'shteki Te'edim Askinan. We're talking about where there were two valid sets of offsetting witnesses, not Edim Zomim, but Edei Hachasha. There were two sets of offsetting witnesses. Achas Omeres, or offsetting sets of witnesses. Achas Omeres, one set of witnesses, one completely kosher set of two witnesses. Achas Omeres, Karobla says, you know what? The get was closer to Leah, and Leah really is divorced. Well, if I have two Adim who say Leah really is divorced, so then I can't just let Dina run off and marry Levi without doing Chalitza with Shimon. So that's why in this case I'm going to be quite pleased, because I mamish had two witnesses that corroborated the story that the get that was thrown towards Leah was in fact a good get. As opposed to in our Mishnah, we're not talking about where there is a full, complete, kosher a set of witnesses that testify that it was a good get. But in that case, you do have that according to Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. One, and it's just that they're offsetting because the other set of witnesses says that the get was not a good get because it remained closer to Reuven. That's a real suffix deraisa because I have two witnesses that testify that it really was a good get and that Dina would have to do Yibum or Chalisa with Shiva. So that's why I'm going to require at least Chalisa. However, our Mishnah is talking about where Kazachas, there's only one set of witnesses and they contradict each other. So I don't even have a complete set of witnesses that say that it was a good get. So therefore, I have the right to assume that it was not a good get. So we say, well, how do we know that our Mishnah is talking about where I didn't have two separate sets of witnesses? Maybe our Mishnah also is talking about where I have two separate standalone sets of witnesses. Right? So we say, do me the Kiddushin, because it must be that the case that would have been Gerushin, it's not recorded in our Mishnah, is a case that corresponds to the case that is in our Mishnah of the Safek Kiddushin. Whereas the Safek, whether there was a Kiddushin between Reuven and Leah through a ring to her, and we're not sure if the ring was closer to him or closer to her. Makidushin b'kasa achas, just like the case of Kiddushin, is talking about one set of witnesses with two witnesses contradict each other. Gerushin b'kasa achas, so to the case of Gerushin, if we would have had the case of Gerushin, our Mishnah would have been talking about kasa achas also. The Kiddushin gufayim might be about kasa achas. How do we know that the Kiddushin case in our Mishnah is talking about kasa achas? Maybe it's talking about shtei kitos, the beis kitei edim. No, if our Mishnah was talking about the Kiddushin case, whether it's a suffix, whether Reuven really did contract the marriage with Leah, even beis kitei edim, tisyayvem bein mekaklum. So then we would have said that since there is a set of witnesses, there are two kosher witnesses who say that it was not a good Kiddushin, so then we would say it's okay for Adina to even do a Yibum with Shimon. That doesn't make any sense. So we say, Kaimi Edim, Kami Karv La. What are you talking about? I have another set. I would have had another set. We say Shtei Kitei Edim, it means that there was another set of witnesses that say that the Kiddushin was good, that the ring fell closer to Leah, and you're going to tell me that Amish this Yarim Ben Mekaklum, and you're going to tell me that now Dina can do Yibum with Shimon, and it's not a problem? I have a very legitimate suffix over here in the other direction, that the Kiddushin really was a good Kiddushin, and that Dina is now at Saras Evan. How can you say this Yarim Ben Mekaklum? Are you kidding me? And also, the reality is that even if we would be talking about a case of two different sets of witnesses in the Gerushin context, where I don't know if it was a good Gerushin or if it was a good Gerushin, that also is a suffix d'Rabbanan, not a suffix d'Oraisa, because we would say Because I would say that since beforehand, the Dina had been permitted to Shimon, before this, I'm sorry, that beforehand, Dina had been permitted to Levi because she was really a co-wife of Leah over here. The Dina was a co-wife of Leah. So I would say that I would follow that chazaka, that the chazaka was that I would follow the witnesses who say that the gerushin that Reuven gave Leah was not in fact a good gerushin, and she should still be allowed to go up and marry Levi. Just like we have in the famous case of the possessions of Bar Shatya, that he had property and he sold the property, and we're not sure if it was a valid sale or not. So we say that since we're not sure if it was a valid sale, even though there were two witnesses who said that it was a valid sale, we just followed whatever the chazaka was. The Bar Shatya Zavin Nefsing, Bar Shatya sold his nechasim, Asu be a trade be'amik yeshu chalim Zavin. And the two witnesses came along and said he was of the right mind when he sold his. He was mentally competent when he sold his property. He was Bar Shatya, was called Bar Shatya because he was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He sometimes had mental cognition, and sometimes he didn't have mental cognition. So the question was, when he made the sale, was it during the time that he had mental competence or not? Two witnesses said it was, he had competence during that time, and two witnesses said no, he didn't have competence during that time. Ravashi, that because of the fact that I have two sets of conflicting witnesses who betray the hard betray, let's turn the page. Ba'ara ukma, the same way we would nowadays. Ba'ara ukma b'cheskas bar shatya, and therefore, if the possessions remain with him. So if we're going to say in the case where there's one set of witnesses, that we're going to assume that Dina is in the same chazaka and the divorce wasn't really a divorce, it's just go up and marry Levi, we should say the same thing, even if there are two sets of witnesses. Elam Abaye, rather Abaye said, you know what, really the case of our Mishnah speaks about Safek Kiddushin, but the same halacha that we say Choletzis Lo Mitzvah Emes would also apply to the case of Safek Gerushin, that we would require Dina to do Chalitza with Shimon, and we don't just allow her to go up and marry Lashuk. So Yagid Alavreya, Tanam Kiddushin within the Gerushin, pasuk in Eov, that we mutandis, as Rav Aaron Lichtenstein would say, that we say on this with respect to Kedushin, and we would say the same din of Safek Karav in the case of Gerushin. So Antana Gerushin was doing the Kedushin. And the cases of Safek that we have in Gerushin in our Mishnah, we would also apply to Kedushin. Like, for example, where it says that Kasav Iksav Yadov Ein Olav Eitim, that would be a Safek. So those would all be Safek cases, not only for Gerushin, but also for Kiddushin. So Amalei Rava, so Rava said, in Yagid Alav Reil, Ma'azel de Katani. So if the cases were not meant to be exclusive to Kiddushin or Gerushin in our Mishnah, so why does it say in the case of Kiddushin, Zehu Safek Kiddushin, and in the case of Gerushin, it says Zehu Safek Gerushin? So it sounds like any other case would not be a Safek Gerushin. Any other case would not pertain to the other category. This is only a Safek in the realm of Kiddushin, but not a Safek in the realm of Gerushin. This is only a Safek in the realm of Gerushin, but not a Safek in the realm of Kiddushin. So therefore, Rava says that would be a good kasha, right? So you can't say that what's listed in one applies to the other. Elam Rava says it's partially true that what's listed in one applies to the other. Whatever Safek case we have in Kiddushin, namely Safek Karav La, the same Safek would apply if a fellow through the get to his wife Leah, and we're not sure if it was closer to her, closer to him. So then we would also say Koletzis Lo Mitzvah Emes. He also agrees that our Mishnah is non-exclusive in that respect. However, the other part of the Mishnah, V'yesh B'Gerushin Ma'ashem Kiddushin. In the case of Gerushin, the Safek cases of Gerushin only apply to Gerushin and do not apply to Kiddushin. V'zehu the Gerushin Lav Davka. So therefore, when it says V'zehu in a Gerushin, it's Lav Davka, meaning it doesn't mean, these are the only cases of Safek and Gerushin, but the case of Safek Lo Karav Lo, Safek Karav Lo is not a Safek. No, that is a Safek. Elam Mishum the Tana Zehu B'Kiddushin, because they have to say Zehu Safek Kiddushin in our Mishnah, where it said that the Zehu Safek Kiddushin, so that it is clearly implying where it said Zehu Safek Kiddushin. So that is intended to say only these cases of a Safek in the Kiddushin realm, only Safek Kovla, Safek Kovla, but all the cases that are listed as a Safek for Gerushin, he wrote it in his own handwriting, but it's in Avedim, those are not considered to be Safek cases in the realm of Kiddushin. V'zeu de Kiddushin limute mai. So when we say Zeu Kiddushin, the only Safek cases in Kiddushin are Safek Karov Law, Safek Karov Law. So what's not considered to be a Safek case for Kiddushin purposes, Limute Zman. The case of Zman, where we said, in the case where a person wrote a get for his wife in his own handwriting, or he had a case, this was the second case, right? Yesh Lav Eidem Emos Man. He wrote a get to his wife. This is really the case we're focusing upon. There's a difference between the two. He wrote a case to his wife, and there were no witnesses. So we say that, or I'm saying not that there were no witnesses. There were witnesses, but there was no Zman. There was no date. It was written on the get. So we say that's a Safek get. If there was no date, because the Chachamim said you shouldn't divorce for such a get, it's not considered to be good on a Durabanan level. It's not considered to be good, even though on a Deraisa level it would be good. So we say that doesn't pertain to the case of Kiddushin at all, because because we don't require Zman. We don't require, in the Shtar Kiddushin, we don't require the date to be written. Why don't we require the get to be written in a Shtar Kiddushin? We don't do this nowadays. Nowadays, we only marry women with a ring. We only do Kiddushay Kesef. We don't do Kiddushay Shtar. If we would do Kiddushay Shtar, so Kiddushay Shtar has this feature to it that it would not require a Zman. It would not require the date on Kiddushay Shtar. There were a group of rabbis that decided that they wanted to reinstitute Kiddushay Shtar. They thought that it would be a neat thing, and that maybe it would be like more respectful of the woman. You're not like, buying her off with a ring. So you can guess which rabbis introduced this idea. And we said, are you out of your minds? So so this would make sense if we say that the reason why we put the date in a get is to determine from which point in time is the husband not allowed to eat from the peiros niximilug of the wife. This is working according to the assumption that as soon as he writes a get for his wife, that he decides that he wants to divorce his wife, he's already not entitled to eat the peiros niximilug. So we want to know from what point in time is he not entitled. But they're writing a date when you're marrying. Remember, we're talking about betrothal, kiddushin here, not nisuin. So there isn't nisuin yet when a shtar kiddushin is handed over to a woman. So even after the kiddushin, the husband who's only betrothed to her is not allowed to start eating from her niximilug. So the date wouldn't make a difference anyway. Arusa leis laperi. A husband's only entitled to the peiros niximilug of his wife after the nisuin, not after the erusin. Elaman de Amar mishuma. So then that makes sense that we understand why you wouldn't write a date in the shtar erusin, because it wouldn't have a nafkamina the same way that it would with respect to a get to demarcate the point in which the husband is no longer allowed to eat from the peiros niximilug. But according to the opinion that the reason why we write the date in Gittin is because maybe the husband's going to be married to his niece, right? Reuben's going to marry his niece, Dina, over here, and she's going to go up and have a relationship with Levi. That's not a good thing, obviously, while she's married to Reuben. But Reuben doesn't want her to get killed from the Beis Din. So therefore, he'll say, the relationship took place. Remember, if it wouldn't have a date, so he would say, her relationship with Levi took place after the get. He'll try to protect her, but we don't want her to be protected. We want her to be punished if she had an affair with Levi before she was divorced from Reuben. But Reuben might come to protect her. So Mishum Basakos, to prevent that from happening, we put a date so we'll know exactly when the divorce took place. So whether therefore she's liable for capital punishment for having the affair with Levi. So we should put his man in Kiddushin as well, so that we'll be able to determine if she had an affair with Levi before, after the erusin. If Reuven, wants to protect her, he'll say, no, the affair took place before the erusin. So if we have a date in the shtar kiddushin, we'll be able to determine if she was an Ashes Ish when she had the affair with Levi or not. So we say no. We're not going to put this man because there are many people who get married by giving a ring under the chuppah. Not under the chuppah in those days, by giving a ring and saying Arayat Mekudeshes Li, and therefore you can't put on the ring, you can't engrave into the ring the date, because that would be like weird. So you give if a person's getting married through money, so there's no way to register this man. So they're not going to make a takana that's only going to work for some of the cases and not for the other cases. So so on that answer that was just given, so Rav Yosef asked a kasha, and he was the kasha that he asked. He said, "Ha'avda." But what about a deed of emancipation that is given to a slave when an emancipation proclamation, when a slave goes free? Ha'avda, the ika is the kani b'kaspa, the ika b'shtara. Some acquire. This is talking about not actually the slave going free, but selling a slave. So if you sell a slave, you can sell a slave with money, or you can sell a slave with a star. And nonetheless, nonetheless, the Chachamim established that there should be a Zman to indicate the date of the sale, despite the fact that sometimes it's not going to be relevant, because sometimes the sale is only going to take place with money. So we say, no, Hassam, that's a different story, because Ruba, the Shtara, most of the sales of Avadim take place with Shtar. Hacharuba, the Kaspa. However, when a man marries a woman, most of the cases of a man marrying a woman are contracted with kesef, with money, as opposed to a shtar. Mishum delafsher. Or we could say alternatively that there's no other way of doing it, meaning in the case that we can't possibly have a shtar zaman, we can't enact. It's not going to accomplish anything to enact the zaman in the shtar kiddushin. So that's why we would only do it in the get itself and not in a shtar kiddushin. Why? Why does it not accomplish anything to do it in a shtar kiddushin? For the following reason: who's going to hold on to the shtar? Who's going to hold on to the shtar? Lincha gabi dida. If we leave the shtar with the wife, and now she has an affair, she's going to want to conceal the fact that the affair took place after the date of kiddushin. So she's going to erase the date. Lincha gabi dida. If we leave the shtar with Ruvain, who cares about his niece Dina and doesn't want her to get into trouble, even though she cheated on him. Zimnin the Bazakos. So sometimes he'll be married to his niece. So he's going to want to protect her from not getting killed. And therefore he's going to erase the date. Lincha Gabi Edim, if you're going to leave the Shtar Kiddushin with the witnesses, well, what are witnesses good for? If the witnesses are going to testify that they remember the date, I don't need the date to be written on the Shtar. Below Zimnin, below, and if they don't remember the date, and they're only going to remember the date by virtue of looking at the Shtar, they're not allowed to testify only based on written documentation. They're obligated to testify based on their actual personal recollection. Below, Zimin the Chazam Mechtaba, sometimes they're going to look at the shtar, and rather than refreshing their recollection, they're going to rely solely upon the shtar. And the Torah says, Mipihem, that the testimony has to be based on the mouths of the Edim, Lo Mipiksavam, and not based on documentary evidence. And they're going to end up testifying based on documentary evidence. So if that's the case, so why don't I have the same concern with respect to the get, that even if I write the date in the get, it's still going to be erased by somebody, by the wife or by the husband afterwards, in order to protect her if she had an affair prior to the date written in the get, and they'll just say that the affair occurred afterwards. So we say no. There, once we enact, this is what Rashi says, once we enact the requirement to register the date in the get, if I didn't have the date, I would assume that she was married until the last possible moment. So therefore, it would be an indictment of her. We would assume that the relationship with Levi took place prior to the get, and we would put her to death. So so it's not going to do her any good to erase it. It's just going to end up working against her, as opposed to a shtar kiddushin, where we're going to follow the chazaka that she wasn't betrothed beforehand. So we'll assume that when she had the relationship with Levi, if there's no date in the shtar kiddushin, that it took place prior to the betrothal. That's what Rashi says. Tosa says we don't really put people to death based on those types of presumptions. But Tosa says what it means is that she doesn't want to create any problems with respect to a get, because it's so hard for a woman to receive a get in the first place, and therefore we're worried that it's going to make her into an aguna. Therefore, that's what we're worried about, as opposed to being mikudeshes. Okay, so if you were with somebody, and you weren't mikudeshes, nothing's going to happen to you. But with Gerishin, she wants her to be able to be a free woman. So therefore, it's more in her interest that she not do anything that is going to cast aspersions on the shtar Gerishin. That's why we're not worried about. Okay.
At all times that if there was a question on the get, she's like, no, we did this right.
No, the opposite. Well, if there's a question on the get, then we would assume that we didn't do it right. That's why she wouldn't want to erase again the Zman from a get. because you'll see that there was an erasure, and you'll say, oh, so that therefore the get's no good, and we're not going to allow her to get remarried. So if that's not what she wants. So Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Naya Mishnah, Gimel Achin. Okay, so we're back to our but now it's 3 brothers. Okay, so Levi is also a brother in this case. Okay, so Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, they're all brothers. Okay, Gimel Achin is doing Gimel Nakriyas, but none of these women, Leah over here, Rachel over here, and Dina over here, none of them are related to each other. Okay, one of the husbands, Levi over here, he dies, right? And Reuven gives some money, Kesef Kiddushin, to Dina, says, okay, I'm doing Maimer. Eventually, don't worry, we'll get around to Yibum, but right now I did Maimer. Okay, so she's getting a little bit closer to him. Okay, and then what happens? Before he has a chance to do Yibum, Umes, Reuven dies. As usual, the only one left standing is Shimon. Okay, so therefore, they both have to do chalitza, and both the Dina over here and Leah over here have to do chalitza, but they don't do yibum. Because it says that if a husband dies, so his wife should do yibum, right? But that's only if it's only his wife. But what if the woman is both the wife of Reuven and she's the wife of Levi? She never became fully the wife of Reuven, so she's still attached a little bit to Levi. She became partially the wife of Reuven because he did Maimer, so she's attached to him too. So because of the fact that she is sort of attached to 2 men, so therefore she is excluded from the pasuk of Yivama Yavo Aleh, because this is a case where there is because Aleh teaches me Shaleh Zikas Yavam Echad, below Shaleh Zikas base Yavamin, and not if there's a Zika of 2 Yavamin. And this woman over here, Leah, she is sort of a tzara to this situation, and therefore we would say that in this case you would not allow Yibum. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Miyavim Leisa Shiyotza. You're saying that really it should be okay with Leah, right? So you're right, but we'll get to that. So, but certainly in the case of Dina, there would be a problem because Dina was connected both to Levi and to Reuven at the time that Reuven died, and therefore she is essentially attached to 2 Yavamin, and that's not just Yavama, Yavo Aleh. This is a case where there is Shaleh Zikas Yavam Echad, below Shaleh Zikas base Yavamin. There is a Zika coming from 2 different Yavamin. She's not just Aleha of one Yavam, right? Okay, Misha Aleha, fine. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon, however, says, no, why are we worried about that? That he says that it's like a Miman Shach. If the mimer that was performed by Reuven towards Dina was a good mimer, so then she's considered to be the wife of Reuven. In which case you could do Yibum with her or with her co-wife, and and it's no problem. And if the mimer was not a good mimer, so then she was still considered to be only attached to Levi, in which case you could still do Yibum with her, and it would be perfectly fine. And you have to do Chalitza with the other one. The reason why you have to do Chalitza with the other one is because it's perfectly possible that both of them belong to different Yavamim. Maybe the mimer didn't accomplish anything, and therefore Leah still requires Yibum Chalitza herself. So that, but on the other hand, maybe the mimer did accomplish something. If the mimer did accomplish something, so then Shimon wouldn't be allowed to do Yibum with both of them. So therefore, with the one that he didn't do Yibum, he has to do Chalitza. Question, yes.
What exactly is the act of mimer?
The act of mimer is giving Kesef Kiddushin. He says, Aram Mekudeshesli, whatever. He gives her. He did, yeah, that's okay. So the Gemara says, Vizika space Yavarim de Araisa, if according to the Tanakama, this problem that he's identified that Dina belongs kind of like was attached to Levi and attached to Reuven as well at the time that Reuven died, after both of them died, and that's the reason why there is no requirement for Yibum. So why are we requiring Chalitza? He said, we say no, it's not a din d'oraisa, it's a din d'rabbanan, and that's why we still require Chalitza. What's the din d'rabbanan? What I'm worried is that if I would have both of them do Yibum, it looks a little bit based on the Maimer that Dina was already married to Reuven, and I can't have two wives of the same husband both perform Yibum, because once one wife performs Yibum, so then the other wife is out of the picture and she can't perform Yibum anymore. They can't both marry the brother. Only one of them can marry the brother. So therefore, that's why we say that we don't allow a situation of Yibum. Okay. So why don't we do what Rabbi Shimon suggested? Why don't we have one of them do Yibum and the other one do Chalitza, just in case both of them are considered to be co-wives of Reuven? So have one of them do Yibum and the other one will say they'll assume the Maimer, and then say that both Dina and Leah were considered to be the wives of Reuven. And we see from here that whenever a person dies without children and has two wives, one of them has to do Yibum and the other one has to do Chalitza. And that's not true. One of them does Yibum and then the other one is free and clear. So they'll make a mistake with respect to the din. So who cares? Let people make that mistake. What mikshol is going to come from it? So he said, no, the mikshol that might come is as follows. Either hakinami. If the yibum comes first and then the chalitza, so chalitza is lomar l'moed, so that would be okay. And the gzeira, but we have a gzeira that maybe the chalitza will come first. And then yibum is not permitted because let's say I would have a regular situation where a person had two wives and the brother-in-law thinks, oh, I have to do yibum with one and chalitza with the other. He's going to do chalitza first with one. Once he does chalitza first with one, so then he's not allowed to do yibum with the other one anymore because that's the halacha of v'vikam le b'asher lo yivneh, because it says in the Torah, kaka yeyaseh lo ish asher lo yivneh es beis achiv, which means that once chalitza is performed, he's not allowed to be bonus beis achiv anymore. He's not allowed to perform yibum either with the wife with whom he performed chalitza or with her co-wife. Stop here.
Wow.
Okay.
The shear dropped off like the
Right.
Gemara.
Yeah, what happened?
I'm not really sure, but
Nothing personal, I think it's just.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, it's-